Adopted sister gets mocked because she inherits nothing but a broken-down, ruined mansion. Why would anyone give her something so useless while the siblings enjoy everything else? She quietly accepts it but starts renovating, refusing to give up. Neighbors whisper, siblings taunt, but something strange is happening inside the ruins. Mansion holds a hidden secret tied to her late adoptive father's empire. Underground deeds, coded letters, secret accounts. Mansion was not trash, but the key to $150 million fortune, shocking everyone who laughed at her. Leave it hanging with. But what she did next with the fortune, that's a story you don't want to miss. They laughed. They didn't just laugh. They mocked, pointed, and whispered as if life had played a cruel joke on her. The grand hall of the family estate was filled with arrogant smiles that evening, the kind of smiles only siblings drenched in pride can wear. Her so-called family, the blood heirs, stood tall, confident that fortune would forever bow to them. And there she was, the adopted sister, standing quietly in the corner, waiting for her name to be called, waiting for the will to be read. When the attorney finally announced her share, the room erupted with snickers. A ruined mansion. Nothing else. A crumbling, broken structure standing on the outskirts of the city, abandoned for decades, surrounded by wild vines and shattered windows. That was all she was given. No cash, no jewelry, no companies, no trust funds. Just a property that everyone knew was a graveyard of dust and memories. The siblings didn't even try to hide their cruelty. One of them leaned in, smirking, and said, "Well, maybe now you'll finally have a place that matches you. Broken and worthless." Another burst into laughter, adding, "I bet the rats living there are richer than you." Their words were knives, but she didn't flinch. Not once. She simply bowed her head, accepted the old key handed to her, and walked out. To them, it was over. To her, it was just beginning. That night, as the family celebrated their victories with champagne and smug grins, she stood in front of the mansion. The iron gates groaned as she pushed them open. The air was heavy, carrying the smell of damp wood and forgotten time. Broken glass glittered under the moonlight like tiny shards of betrayal. It wasn't just a house. It was a test, a silent puzzle left behind by someone who believed in her more than anyone else ever did. She stepped inside. Every floorboard creaked, every corridor echoed, and yet something about the silence felt alive. It was almost as if the mansion itself had been waiting for her and her alone. She touched the walls, and memories came rushing back. Her adoptive father's stern face, the way he would say, "Strength is not measured by what you are given, but by what you build." At that moment, her tears refused to fall. She wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She had been chosen. The next morning, while the siblings flaunted their luxury cars and golden accounts, she began her battle. She hired workers, but many quit after a week. The mansion was too eerie, too unsettling. Strange markings were found carved into the wooden beams, as though the house itself carried secrets. Neighbors whispered about hidden rooms, locked vaults, and passages that no one had ever opened. The siblings mocked her harder than ever, laughing that she was pouring what little she had into a coffin of stone. But every insult only fueled her determination. She worked late into the nights, studying old blueprints of the property. That's when she noticed it, a section of the design that didn't match the current structure. There was space unaccounted for, a gap hidden deep beneath the eastern wing. Her heart raced. She followed the trail, removing rotten planks and scraping layers of dust until her hands bled. And then she found it, a staircase, sealed behind a false wall. The air that rose from it was cold, ancient, as though the house had exhaled after holding its breath for decades. She descended with a lantern in her trembling hand. Step by step, the shadows thickened, until she reached a heavy metal door. It wasn't rusted shut, it was locked with precision. A crest she recognized immediately was carved into its center, her father's seal. This was no coincidence. This was deliberate. Meanwhile, the siblings, unaware of her discovery, threw lavish parties with their newfound wealth. They told anyone who would listen that their sister was living among rats, that she had been humiliated forever. But while their laughter echoed in the city, she stood before a door that promised answers. Days turned into weeks. She studied every document her father had ever left behind, searching for the key to the lock. And then, hidden inside one of his old books, she found a letter written in his own hand, addressed to her, the daughter he chose. The words nearly broke her. If you are reading this, it means they laughed. It means they mocked you. But it also means you are ready. This house was never ruined. It was protected. Within it lies everything I built, everything I kept from greedy hands. If you find the door, know this. Only courage, patience, and loyalty will open it. The fortune is yours if you dare to claim it. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't crazy. This wasn't a mistake. The ruined mansion wasn't worthless. It was a vault, a fortress, a test designed only for her. She returned to the hidden chamber, the letter pressed against her heart. With trembling hands, she searched the seal again, this time pressing her father's old ring into its grooves. Slowly, painfully, the lock gave way. The door groaned open. What lay beyond made her knees buckle. Stacks of documents, sealed crates, and rows of ledgers stretched into the darkness. But it wasn't just papers. It was ownership deeds, contracts, shares, and hidden accounts, all amounting to something that would one day shake the very foundation of her arrogant siblings' pride. She staggered back, covering her mouth. This was no ruined mansion. This was a kingdom disguised as rubble. And as the wind howled through the cracks of the old house, she whispered to herself, "They thought I inherited nothing, but I inherited everything." The door stood open, and with it, the past came rushing into the present. Dust swirled in the air as if centuries of silence had been disturbed. She stepped inside slowly, lantern shaking in her hand, eyes wide at the endless shelves that stretched before her. It wasn't gold that glittered here, not diamonds or jewelry. It was something far more powerful, the kind of wealth that could rebuild empires and destroy legacies. Contracts stacked in leather-bound files, ownership deeds rolled and tied with ribbons, share certificates sealed with wax, and hidden bank ledgers filled the room. She picked one up, her hands trembling. The first document alone was worth millions. It was ownership of an entire shipping company, still active, still profitable, hidden under a trust no one had known about. She reached for another file, a portfolio of land scattered across the country, acres upon acres registered under coded names. Then came the journals, her father's handwriting, neat and deliberate, recording every secret transaction, every move to protect what he feared would be stolen by greedy hands. Her lips quivered. It wasn't just $10 million, not $50 million. This was a fortune so vast it was almost impossible to measure. Every crate, every paper, every dusty book was proof that the so-called ruined mansion had been guarding a treasure all along. For hours, she sat on the cold stone floor, reading, counting, piecing together the puzzle her father had left behind. And as the dawn light broke through the cracks of the broken windows above, she finally understood. This wasn't an inheritance. This was a throne. Meanwhile, the siblings lived in arrogance. Their expensive dinners, designer clothes, and loud laughter filled the city. They flaunted their inheritance publicly, gloating about how their poor adopted sister had been left with nothing but rubble. To outsiders, they looked powerful, untouchable. But what they didn't realize was that the foundation of their pride was crumbling beneath their very feet. One afternoon, she quietly walked into the family's bank, carrying a single folder from the vault. The manager's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. Within minutes, hush phone calls began, executives rushing to verify signatures. By evening, it was confirmed she wasn't the outcast. She was the majority shareholder of their most valuable company, the very empire her siblings were boasting about. The shock came fast. Their cards declined. Their accounts froze. Their authority evaporated overnight. Panic spread among them as news reached their ears. "How is this possible?" one brother shouted. "We own everything." She was given nothing, but nothing could change the truth now. While they raged in disbelief, she returned to the mansion. The house no longer looked ruined in her eyes. The cracked walls were strong. The broken windows were alive. The silence was sacred. This place had given her the strength to rise from ashes, to endure humiliation, to wait patiently while they wasted themselves in pride. Word began to spread in the city. Journalists whispered about the mysterious woman who had suddenly gained control of a vast empire. Workers who had abandoned the mansion weeks ago now begged to return, realizing they had walked away from history in the making. Investors requested meetings. Banks extended hands. The world that had laughed at her was now bowing. Still, she remained quiet. She did not gloat. She did not run to her siblings to scream in their faces. She remembered her father's words, "Strength is not in what you are given, but what you build." And so she built. Renovations resumed. The mansion began to change. Broken windows were replaced with glass that shone like fire under the sun. Gardens bloomed again where weeds had once choked the land. Chandeliers lit the halls where darkness had ruled for decades. Piece by piece, the house came alive, becoming not just a home but a monument to patience, resilience, and faith. The siblings, meanwhile, descended into chaos. Their pride turned into rage, their rage into jealousy, their jealousy into desperation. They demanded meetings with lawyers, but every page of the will was airtight. Every document her father had hidden was legally binding. They had no claim. They had mocked her, and now they were powerless. One evening, unable to resist, they drove to the mansion. The same gates they once laughed about now stood tall and restored, glowing under golden lights. They pressed forward, hoping to find her alone and vulnerable. Instead, they were greeted by rows of cars lined in the driveway, executives and officials arriving to meet with her. Their laughter froze on their lips. The mansion wasn't a ruin anymore. It was a palace. They stepped inside uninvited, and for the first time, they saw her not as the weak adopted sister, but as a woman standing tall, draped in quiet dignity. She looked at them, her gaze calm, not vengeful. That cut deeper than anger. Because silence in the face of arrogance is the loudest victory of all. One of the brothers stammered, "This isn't possible. This should be ours." She simply placed a document on the table before them. "This," she said softly, "was never yours. It was never meant for greedy hands. It was meant for the one who could carry it without being crushed by it." Her words struck like thunder. They had mocked her, dismissed her, discarded her, but now they stood trembling in the house they had called worthless, staring at the empire they had mocked her for inheriting. The night ended with them leaving in silence, no words, no insults, no laughter. Their arrogance had been burned to ashes, and all that remained was the shadow of their downfall. As the doors of the mansion closed behind them, she walked to the grand hall where portraits of the family hung on the walls. Her father's portrait stood at the center, his eyes painted with the same fire she now carried. She whispered, "I found it. I kept your trust, and I will build it stronger than ever." The mansion, once broken, now pulsed with life. The empire, once hidden, now stood in her hands. And the world that had mocked her was about to witness a rise so powerful, so unstoppable, that even her siblings would be forced to bow. Because what they had dismissed as nothing had turned out to be everything. And what they thought was ruined had become the foundation of a legacy worth $150 million. The mansion no longer whispered of ruin. It sang. Its walls, once cracked and broken, gleamed under new paint. Chandeliers spilled golden light across polished marble floors. Every room breathed again, alive with the sound of workers, investors, and allies who now saw her as the rightful heir to a legacy greater than anyone had imagined. But it wasn't the chandeliers or the marble that captured attention. It was her. The woman who had once been mocked as an outsider now carried herself with a quiet strength that silenced even the loudest rooms. The city began to talk, not in whispers this time, but in admiration. "The adopted daughter," they said, "she's the one who holds it all now." Newspapers published her story on their front pages. Headlines screamed of the revelation, how the siblings who inherited everything had squandered it in pride, while the one who was given ruin uncovered a $150 million empire. Her face appeared in magazines, not as a scandal, but as an icon of resilience. People wanted to know her secret, her strength, her silence. And yet, in the heart of all this recognition, she never forgot the night they laughed at her. That cruel evening echoed in her mind like a scar carved into her soul. She remembered every smirk, every insult, every time they looked down on her. It wasn't revenge she sought, but justice. A balance of dignity. The siblings, meanwhile, crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. With accounts frozen and assets slipping away, they found themselves drowning in debt. The luxury cars were repossessed. The parties stopped. Friends who once drank at their tables disappeared as quickly as shadows at dawn. The city that had cheered for them now mocked their downfall. They could not bear it. One by one, they tried to confront her, each more desperate than the last. The eldest brother stormed into the mansion first, rage twisting his face. "You can't do this. We're blood. You're nothing but an adopted charity case," he shouted, his voice echoing through the restored hall. But she didn't flinch. She simply held up the deed to the empire he once boasted about. "This was never yours," she said, her voice calm, unshaken. "And blood means nothing when the heart is rotten." He stormed out, humiliated, his pride shattered like glass underfoot. The second sibling, the sister who had laughed the loudest that day, arrived days later. Tears stained her face now. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the pride. "Please," she begged, "help us. We have nothing left. I was wrong about you." For a moment, silence filled the room. The adopted sister looked into her eyes, searching for sincerity, but what she saw was not remorse. It was desperation, a hunger for survival, not love. She shook her head slowly. "I needed your kindness when I was at my lowest. You gave me cruelty instead. And now you ask for kindness? Life does not bend that way." The sister fell to her knees, but the adopted woman turned and walked away. Some lessons were meant to burn forever. The youngest brother tried last. He came not with anger, not with tears, but with a hollow laugh. "Well played," he muttered bitterly. "You tricked us all. You fooled father. You fooled the lawyers. You fooled everyone." She stepped closer, her eyes sharp as fire. "I fooled no one. I simply had the courage to look deeper, to hold on when you all gave up. That's the difference between inheritance and destiny." His smirk faded, replaced by the crushing weight of truth. He left without another word. Their downfall was complete. Stripped of wealth, of pride, of dignity, the siblings who once mocked her could no longer lift their heads in public. Their names became lessons whispered in the city, warnings of arrogance, greed, and cruelty. Meanwhile, she flourished. The mansion became more than a home. It became a symbol. Conferences were held in its grand hall, deals signed in its chambers, and charities launched from its gardens. Every brick of the estate now carried a story of transformation, a reminder that what is mocked as worthless may, in truth, be priceless. But her greatest triumph was not the $150 million. It was the silence of her siblings. The silence of those who once laughed the loudest. Nothing thundered louder than their absence, their inability to face her now. On the anniversary of her father's death, she held a gathering at the mansion. Executives, leaders, and officials filled the hall. Cameras flashed, microphones leaned forward, eager to capture her words. She stood beneath her father's portrait, her voice steady, her eyes glowing with resolve. "My father once told me," she began, "that strength is not measured by what you are given, but by what you build. When I was handed the key to this mansion, the world thought it was a curse. They called it ruined. But ruin is only ruin if you accept it. I did not. I believed. And in believing, I found not just wealth, but purpose." The hall erupted in applause. Cameras clicked, capturing her dignity, her fire, her truth. She was no longer the adopted sister. She was the heir, the leader, the woman who turned mockery into power. As the applause faded, she walked out into the garden. The night was calm, the stars burning bright. She looked up, whispering softly, "I kept your trust, Father, and I will carry this legacy, not with arrogance, but with dignity." In the distance, hidden among the shadows, her siblings stood watching. Their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They could not enter, could not belong, could not stand beside her anymore. They had laughed once, but laughter had abandoned them forever. The mansion glowed behind her like a beacon, its lights cutting through the darkness of the night. And she, standing tall in silence, became the living symbol of what happens when dignity triumphs over arrogance, when patience outlasts cruelty, and when one broken key unlocks not ruin, but a fortune greater than anyone could ever imagine. She did not chase revenge. She did not seek their approval. She simply lived, stronger than before, leaving them to drown in the echoes of their own laughter. And the world watched a woman who had been given nothing, rise to hold everything, watched the mansion transform into a palace of legacy, and watched dignity rewrite a story that will be remembered for generations. Because in the end, the greatest wealth was not the $150 million. It was the moment when the world realized that the girl who was mocked, dismissed, and forgotten had become unstoppable.